There it is. Deshaun Watson has been traded to the Cleveland Browns. What a haul the Texans got, including 3 first-round picks, a 2023 third-round pick, and a 2024 fourth-round pick. This was a move that, honestly, I heard it today. Someone came out to me and said, I really think team A is the winner and team B is the loser here. I don't think any team lost in this deal. I think Houston got exactly what they wanted for Deshaun Watson, and I think Cleveland gave up exactly what they wanted to get Deshaun Watson. Aaron, what are your thoughts on that, on a winner and a loser of this trade?
Specifically winner loser, I agree. I think both teams end up coming out with what they wanted in the end. You get a team like Houston who's kind of in this full rebuild mode, but we know Deshaun Watson wasn't going to play there again. He has expressed his desire to be elsewhere since last season, and we knew that was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. And I think Cleveland is a team that wants to win now. They have a team that's built kind of that foundation of, running the football, good, solid defense, a bunch of talented names everywhere. And they felt like they were just in a dynamic quarterback away. And obviously Baker Mayfield, Cleveland did not see that in Baker Mayfield and wanted to move on if they could upgrade it at the position. So I think it was good for both teams. I don't really think you can look at this deal and say, oh, one team got robbed or this team got an A and this team got an F. I think they both made out with what they wanted. And I heard this today a lot. There is no price. So looking at all the picks and what was given up, there is no price for a 26-year-old franchise quarterback. And it doesn't matter how many draft picks it would have cost. If a team was smart, they were in. They should have been in on him, and it didn't matter what the cost was going to be. So I think both teams came out pretty well in this situation.
Yeah, and to me, the fact that Cleveland didn't have to give up any players in this deal is huge for them. I mean, we see so many times teams, and I connect this to other sports, and I talked to my dad about it today, actually. Teams during the trade deadline of their seasons, they normally end up giving up sometimes too many valuable pieces that are maybe already on a roster. Like with Cleveland, there were rumors of maybe a Greg Newsome going the other way to Houston in this deal. They didn't have to break up anyone from this team that we have all already said is a pretty stacked team. They were just maybe a quarterback away. Now they get Deshaun Watson. And not only did this come with picks being dealt, but Deshaun Watson also got a massive Deshaun Watson got the bag. Like this is the exact definition of getting the bag with a new 5-year, $230 million contract. Like the highest paid quarterback, the highest paid player of all time in the NFL. This deal is an incredible deal for Deshaun Watson. I do have one question though regarding this deal, and I want to get your thoughts on it here. With Deshaun Watson getting this massive contract, do you worry at all about Cleveland's future in terms of paying? I don't know if they need to pay Myles Garrett, but that contract is probably gonna come up at all. Then you have a Denzel Ward, and then you have other studs on that team that you might have to pay later on. Do you fear for the Cleveland Browns' future? Maybe not. Maybe they win a Super Bowl in the next 3 or 4 years, but maybe in year 5 you have to start worrying about it. That you pay Deshaun Watson, you can't pay anyone else. Any fears?
2 things about the contract that was given to him. Number one, money talks. And as much as the reports today said he wanted to be in Atlanta and he was done with Cleveland because of the weather, you give him $230 million guaranteed. Number one, they only have $10 million counting against the cap this year. And that's his base salary is only $1 million, which if he gets suspended comes out of that. The way they structured the deal only benefits Deshaun Watson. I think Cleveland was smart here. Number one, they just re-signed Myles Garrett. He's locked up till 2025 or 2026. Amari Cooper is locked up for another couple of years because he took the contract, or they took the contract from Dallas, right? And he was already on a long-term deal. So he's got 3 or 4 more years. They have Nick Chubb. They have Kareem Hunt. So they got dual backfield. They got a really good offensive line, even though they lost one of their main pieces who runs the NFLPA on that front line. They got a good young secondary in Denzel Ward. You talked about Newsome, Grandel Pitt. Like this is a team. You still got Jock over there, who we loved last year as a rookie coming out. He's going to be in year 2. Is he going to get better? You're talking about a team that on paper is absolutely loaded with elite talent. And now you bring in one of the top, I'm not lying when I say this, a top 3 quarterback in the NFL when he is healthy and on the field and playing. And I know he's been in Houston, but he's done amazing things in Houston with basically nothing there. I think Cleveland wins in this situation. Now, I just don't want to hear about how this was the best fit for him and it wasn't about the money, because I would attribute Cleveland and New Orleans have very similar rosters.
Yep.
They both have a number 1 receiver. We talk about Michael Thomas and Amari Cooper. You got the backfield and Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb. You have a really good offensive line, especially if Teron Armstead would have came back. You have a really, really good defense in New Orleans. So I don't want to hear about, well, he feels like he had a better chance to win in Cleveland, because I think that's absolute BS. Yeah. I think it came down to the contract that New Orleans wasn't going to be able to pay and that Cleveland could. You're not going to sell out on a dome team in the NFC where it's easier with a similar team versus going to play in crappy weather Cleveland with the similar roster just because you feel like you can win better there. I don't buy that. I think it was about the money in the end. But good for him. Good for him. Get your bag, because you never know.
And there is one little note on this contract that I'm not sure anyone's really talking about. In Houston, and obviously I don't think he would have ever played for Houston ever again, but under the contract that he was tied to Houston, he would have lost $2 million per game with the Texans.
Yep.
For the suspension that he could face in this upcoming season. Now that goes from $2 million a game to just $55,000. And obviously we're talking chump change to these guys, but it does matter at the end of the day for them. Like, we look at that as chump change, but like, it matters to them. So
that was the biggest selling point for Cleveland, was restructuring that deal to benefit him by making his base salary only $1 million and making everything else guaranteed signing bonus money. And I think that's what sold him.
Yeah, and we saw the reports the other day where it was Cleveland is now out of the race for Deshaun Watson. The thing that changed everything in this Cleveland, New Orleans, Atlanta race for Watson is the money. Is that contract that they offered him. He could not refuse that offer. And now you look at this team in Cleveland where you have all the superstars, you have all this, and we've now talked about this now with 2 teams where you're just like, okay, they're a quarterback away. We talked about it with Denver, then they acquired Russell Wilson. Now, Cleveland was a quarterback away. They acquired Deshaun Watson. When you look at those 2 teams, Aaron, who is in a better position to go for it all this year, to get to be in the Super Bowl at the end in February of next year?
Man, I don't know. If on the surface, I'm going to say Cleveland, because I think their division is slightly easier to get through than Denver's is. And we'll get into kind of that division when we kind of talk about Devontae Adams. But I think it's easier for Cleveland to win that division. I still like Cincinnati, but they're still young. They lost some pieces, and they haven't added the impact pieces like a Cleveland had, obviously, with Deshaun Watson. Baltimore is going to be interesting because they're getting guys back. And then you add a guy like Marcus Williams. You bring back J.K. Dobbins. Lamar Jackson comes back healthy. I'm sure they're still going to address the pass rush situation now that Zadarius Smith has kind of backed off that deal. And then you have Pittsburgh, who's kind of a wild card, who's had a really good defense. They still have weapons offensively, but that offensive line, and then what is Mitchell Trubisky going to give you? I like Cleveland slightly over Denver as far as being Super Bowl favorites. But let's be honest. The thing that shocked me the most is, why would anybody want to play in the AFC right now? Like, with those teams, like, why would anybody want to play in the AFC? That surprised me. But at the end of the day, the reports today with Carolina saying no to some of the contract things that they wanted, he said no to them. The Saints couldn't do some of the things that the Browns wanted to do. And that's ultimately what it came down to. There was reports today that Atlanta was balking at the idea of changing the contract up for Deshaun Watson. And I think that's ultimately what the deciding factor was. He wanted that guaranteed money. He wanted to make sure it wasn't going to impact him this year if he's suspended. And now he's in Cleveland, and they should be going into the season, in my opinion, the favorite to win the AFC North. And that's a big from me, because you know me. I've always said they had really good talent, but Baker Mayfield was holding them back.
Yep. Yep, that he was. He was. Now, before we go into the Baker Mayfield talk about this whole thing, I do want to cover the other side because I know a lot of people are talking about the Deshaun Watson trade and what it means for Cleveland, but there's another team in this deal, and we'll pull it back up again, the graphic for what they got in exchange for Deshaun Watson. Houston has got a lot of assets in the future, not only with the 3 first-round picks, but I mean they've got the cap space, they are primed for a good start to this rebuild here. And I see in the chat we got Mike in here. Shout out Mike. I don't think I've ever seen him in the chat here before. So shout out to any new listeners that join in the show. What does this deal mean for the Houston Texans, and where do they go from here?
It's big. I think the biggest thing here is it shows by them, especially not acquiring Baker back in the deal, right? Them saying, you know what, we feel comfortable going into the 2022 season with Davis Mills. And I think that says a lot. They like the progression that he had last year. And we're talking about a quarterback last year who we thought might have been one of the better rookie quarterbacks, like kind of under the radar as far as his performance. They're getting a absolute haul. You're talking about 3 first-round picks. The second time in history that 3 first-round picks have been traded for a player. The other trade was obviously the Herschel Walker, just massive deal for the Dallas Cowboys, which turned that franchise into a dynasty when they were able to draft players like Russell Maryland, Emmitt Smith, and those guys. So I think it's big for Houston. You can build around Davis Mills. You can get a foundation there. They've already been re-signing a lot of their players that contributed last year that have kind of helped change the culture there. You bring in a new coach in Lovie Smith, who's really, really good defensive mind. I like what Houston's doing. They had to get away from that old era, Bill O'Brien, that this negative. I think this does that. I think it kind of gives them a clean slate, and I think they got a bright future as long as they can hit on those draft picks, right? That's what it ultimately comes down to, hitting on those draft picks and allowing Davis Mills to kind of grow within that offense. But I think it's something that they can do now that they can use those picks to surround him with talent instead of having to go out and look for a quarterback, right? Which you can spend a couple of first rounders doing. Because if Davis Mills had stayed in college and entered this draft, you could be talking about him as one of the top quarterbacks, probably number 2 or number 3, if not fighting for that number 1 quarterback spot in this draft.
Yeah, and who knows if Davis Mills does play poorly this year and they want to move on, they now have the draft capital to be able to possibly either move up or to draft Bryce Young and then have them primed to build around him. So Houston is in a good position right now, moving forward. Shout out to them. One last question, and this can be real quick. Any concern at all for Watson having a year off and coming in? Any rust, anything like that? Any concern?
I mean, yeah, you're always going to have rust, but it's going to take time for him to kind of build with that team anyways. Right now, he's coming into a new offense. He's got to build a rapport with Amari Cooper and who else do they have? They just re-signed somebody.
Rashard Higgins,
I believe.
Peoples-Jones.
Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's who I was really talking about. Donovan Peoples-Jones. David Njoku's back. I think that he's going to be able to build a rapport in the offseason, and then barring, whatever happens with the suspension, it'll take some time, but I don't care what anybody says. That's an upgrade over Baker Mayfield, even if Deshaun Watson's rusty.